With Windows 11 becoming even more annoying with AI advertisements, often breaking features if you update too fast on a very frequent basis recently, and the fact that many users just prefer Windows 10 and are now forced to update if they want to keep their PC secure, Linux is often being mentioned as a suitable alternative. Sure, it's not perfect, and the competitive scene in particular still needs some convincing. However, from a purely functional standpoint, Linux can essentially play any Windows game you throw at it, thanks to the efforts from Valve and the open source community, which worked on compatibility layers like Proton. But how does someone actually switch to Linux? How do you download and install it? How do you make sure that you don't lose all your data? And which programs are required to make this a flawless experience? All of this and more in today's video. This video was made possible by channel members of our community. If you want to participate in selecting new video topics, see what's going on behind the scenes and gain access to various tips and tricks, then please make sure to check out the join button or the link in the video description down below. The first thing that you need if you want to switch over to Linux is a USB stick or a different medium that is not your main drive that you currently use on Windows, and to choose a Linux distribution that you are comfortable with. On the desktop, the choice of such a distribution does not really matter, and I always say to choose one that just looks right to you, or one that comes with some of the programs installed that you want to use later anyway. As Windows replacement and also a great gaming option, I currently like to use Fedora, but if you're mainly into gaming, then Bazzite might actually be the better choice here, because it already comes with Steam pre-installed and also supports GameScope, the native SteamOS overlay if your system supports it. Just select desktop if you want to install it on a regular PC, enter your hardware details on what you currently have in your system, choose between KDE Plasma or GNOME depending on what interface you prefer, and here you can choose if it should start the GameScope session by default. Again, like mentioned earlier, this depends on if your system supports it. I'm just gonna say no here and download the ISO. Now, in order to actually install Bazzite on our currently in use drive, we need to boot the installer from a second one, since the main disk cannot be in use during the installation. And in my case, that will be the USB stick that I showed you before. But first we need to get our downloaded ISO on there. I personally like to use the Fedora Media Writer, since it's uncomplicated, didn't cause any issues so far, and it works for basically every distro. Power users are more into Rufus, but hey, this one works just fine as well. Now, before we proceed, if you want to install Bazzite on your PC and don't want to lose all your data, then you can either copy all of your important files to a dedicated storage like an external drive, or you pay close attention. If you don't have a dedicated storage or one that is big enough, then as a workaround, what you want to do is to move or copy all your important files to one folder and compress it to a zip file. Then you look at how big that file is. Open up the disk management tool, right-click the partition that says C and click on Shrink Volume. And then you enter a value that is slightly above the file size of your zip file. Basically, we want to have enough space so that our zip file fits on there, but also don't waste all of the other space. Then you right-click the new partition, select New Simple Volume, just click through the wizard, enter Backup as the volume label, and you now have a dedicated drive in your Explorer where you can put your zip file. Again, if you don't want to keep any data or you use an external storage or similar, you can just skip this step, since this is just a workaround to keep your data in case you only have one disk. Now we can reboot and press the key that puts you into your boot menu. On many motherboards, that key is either F7 or F8, but it varies, and you might need to look up the correct key for your specific brand. Alternatively, you could also open the UEFI configuration and set a different boot order. And as a tip, in case the Bazzite still doesn't boot, check if the secure boot configuration says something about Windows only. In that case, either change it to allow third party or straight up disable it. Now, after saving, Bazzite should boot and we can start with the installation. Click on Install to Hard Drive and choose a language. You might need to also change your keyboard and time zone. Now listen carefully. If you have copied your files to an external drive, then you can choose Use Entire Disk. However, if you use the workaround that I've shown you before, then you want to choose Share Disk with other operating systems and click on Next. Now you want to delete all partitions except the one that has the size of the backup one that we've created earlier. This basically means that Bazzite will install itself on our main drive, but not overwrite the backup partition that we created earlier. Last but not least, we will also create a user account, so just enter a name, username and password and click on Begin Installation. After the installation is finished, if you left Secure Boot enabled, it will ask you to enroll a so-called mock key, which is used to verify that you yourself approved that Bazzite is allowed to be booted with Secure Boot turned on essentially. Just choose Enroll Mock, enter Universal Blue according to their documentation and boot into Bazzite. Please note that you actually don't see what you type here. Once in Bazzite, you can connect your backup drive to recover your data, or if you use the workaround, mount the backup partition in the Dolphin file manager by entering the password of your user. Okay, so now you can log into Steam, start downloading your games and play them. But what about non-Steam games? Well, Bazzite comes with an application called Lutris pre-installed, and it allows you to install other game launchers and even regular Windows software to a certain extent. While it does support some integrations in its preferences, the quickest way to find all the required tools is to just search for the game you want to add, choose an installation method, and Lutris handles the rest. If you want more granular control over your games, or maybe you have a game that is pretty old and requires manual fixing, maybe even on Windows, then I personally recommend Bottles instead of Lutris, because you can more easily separate environments. I can create a so-called bottle for the Ubisoft Games Launcher, for example, and create a second bottle with all the required tweaks for that complicated game without the two affecting each other. You can download bottles from the Bazzite software store, and this is also the place where you can find most other software, because Linux is mostly based on software repositories instead of having to find all of the installation files yourself on the internet. Here you can find Discord, Spotify, Office suites, different browsers and much more. The only disadvantage that Bazzite has over a regular Fedora installation is that it is using a so-called atomic model, which means that installing system dependencies is a bit more difficult due to the system being locked down to prevent accidental tampering. Why would you care about that? Well, some gamers like to configure their mice and keyboards, and those often need to install dependencies deep into the system. Most online tutorials refer to using the command line with commands like ujust or rpm-ostree, and you can use them if you want to. However, if you're lucky, then you don't even need to go down that rabbit hole, and rather just launch the Bazzite portal setup tool, whereas you can install programs like OpenRPG to reconfigure your keyboard, or get access to various streaming service shortcuts very easily. For some programs, however, you might need to use the command line, and in all honesty, that's why I usually recommend a desktop operating system distro like Fedora or Zorin OS to most users. Sure, you technically are able to mess up more there, since they are not atomic, and they also don't feature all of the gaming related optimizations like pre-installed software like Steam, but hey, Windows is also not mainly targeted towards gamers. Anyway, now you know how to set up Linux for gaming, and we even assumed the worst case with preserving data. Summarized, we only downloaded an ISO file and put it onto a USB stick, followed a guided installer, and that was it. If you even disabled Secure Boot, you don't even need to worry about the mock enrollment. It's basically just a few clicks and you got a full gaming operating system going. Very nice. So, what do you think of this video? Are there any important tips or steps that I haven't considered? Do you use Bazzite or Fedora yourself? And which tweaks do you like to use? Please let us know in the comment section down below. Before I end this video, I quickly wanted to mention that if you want to support the channel, make even better videos, then please feel free to check out our membership program as well as our online shop, whereas each sale helps to support various open source projects. If you've liked this video, then please make sure to show it with a like. And also don't forget to subscribe to the channel, so that you don't miss out on any future Linux videos just like this one. I hope you had a blast watching and that I'll see you again very soon. But in the meantime, all that's left to say now is good morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. I'll see you around.